Howdy, howdy, fellow movie fans, and welcome back to another edition of the ONETA Movie Show, brought to you by PTE Creative. As always, we're your hosts, myself, Evan Davies, and the movie talking, husky walking friend that we all know and love, Dylan Davies, is also here with us. Today, we're doing something a little bit different for us. We did top 10 last week with comic book movies, and that went real long, but it's just because we love those movies.
A
Um,
little bit.
this is going to be a little bit quicker show. We're going to be doing something that I've actually never seen done before. We're doing top 5 back to school movies, but those movies that are going to put you in a mood that you're ready to go back to school and hopefully give you some fond thoughts of school in some way, shape, or form. So
Yeah.
it's going to be real interesting here. Same style as we did on our top 10 show, whereas if Dylan does not believe there's a single chance in hell we have even a remotely close to similar list. However, just in case, if one of us has it and it's lower on someone's list or higher on someone's list, you wait until it's at the higher spot to discuss it. I do have an
Yeah.
honorable mention if we want to do honorable mentions as well, but I'm good to go.
I just wanted to mention before we start listing, the way I decided to do this list is it literally had to be a back to school movie. So
Oh,
someone
okay.
in the someone in the movie either had to go start a new school or start a new year in school.
Okay. I did not go that far. I just said what puts me in that vibe. School had to be involved in some way, shape, or form in my
Yeah.
list. I did not do some like bogus, you know, oh hey, they would be in school, but you never see the school anything like. It's
Yeah.
still a part of it, um, but I did not delve fully into like yeah, they're going to school or it's their new kid in school or whatever.
Also, have you ever seen the movie Back to School with Rodney Dangerfield?
I have not.
Either have I. That probably would have been a good pick,
Very true.
considering
Uh,
it's literally the title.
very very true. Um, but with that being said, let's get on to it. You want to go honorable mention if you got one?
I got a couple. I got Footloose. I got Kindergarten Cop, and I got Dazed and Confused. But that one I ruled out because it's the end of the year, not the beginning of a year.
Yeah, so I didn't pull into effect end of year or beginning of year. It just wasn't put into school terms.
Yeah,
But those are all interesting picks for sure. Um, especially when you're like dazed and confused, like whatever. Footloose is another good one because you. What's so funny is when you don't realize like that's what has to happen to set up the movie is the kid has to be new in school. So you're like, oh,
yeah,
okay. But it's certainly
yeah.
it's an interesting one nonetheless.
It's such an easy cheat code too.
Very much so. Um, I just watched that for the first time. Like
The
say,
'84 one.
yeah, I just watched that for the first time. I want to say 6 to 8 months ago. Um, just doing my usual scrolling through and filling in my '80s movie knowledge with movies that I should know. Did the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was sometime in the winter because it was around the same time I think I watched Roadhouse for the first time.
Mm,
And what a wild ride that movie is.
yeah.
So, yeah, no, I think those are all fun picks. I got plenty of honorable mentions here. Uh, go to one of Mom's favorite movies. Grease has to be in there for me. Um,
It will make an appearance.
all right, so we won't talk about Grease, but 21 Jump Street would be on my list there.
Oh yeah, that's a good pick.
Mean Girls, that was an ab pick that she brought up that was pretty good.
That will also we'll talk about that.
Okay. And then two that I don't know if you would have on there. One animated film. It's Turning Red. It's a newer movie from Disney. Phenomenal
Yeah.
movie. Great
I
movie.
I only saw that once, and it didn't come to mind at all when
Gotcha.
I was doing the list. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was a
This
good
is
movie though.
it's a very good movie. And another one that at least when I think back to school, I think the time of year a lot. I don't necessarily think of immediately like going into the classroom. I remember the feelings of being around the school or those people. So, Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse is a favorite of mine that I do love
I've
quite a
not
bit. Um,
I've not seen that.
I think it's 2016. It's a dumb little zombie movie, but it at least tries to explain why someone would be good at killing zombies because they're three very resourceful high school students that are scouts, and they get teased and shit on because they're scouts, and they're all. It's actually a pretty decent movie. Ty Sheridan is the star of that film, so
Okay.
you do get some decent stuff there. Um, I've been seeing a lot of. Oh, another one. I want to just throw this out there just because I just remembered it. I watched it 3 days ago. You ever seen the Tender Bar, directed by George
Uh,
Clooney?
no, is that Ben Affleck?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Ab and I literally just watched that about 3 days ago. Highly, highly recommend it. It'll be in this as well, where he's going to Yale, and it's his whole journey going through and becoming a man that he needs to be. Great movie. Highly, highly recommend. But those will all be some honorable mentions for me that are quite fun.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Should we? You want to go first or me?
I'll let you go first. Take the 5.
Okay. My number 5 is School of Rock.
Okay. Okay.
I love that it's not a student starting a new year. It's Jack Black literally committing fraud to start a new school year. As a kid, you never really think about how serious that offense could be.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I yeah, the movie.
That lands you in prison
movie,
for quite a few years, man.
Yeah, the movie really only works because it's Jack Black, and a lot of people find him like kind of annoying, but I am not one of those people. I think he's so likable.
Um, when he has the right role, he's incredibly likable. I love him in the newer Jumanji series. I think he's a really important linchpin in that series. I think both he and Karen Gillan are great linchpins in that series, but it's always going to be credited to The Rock and Kevin Hart. But when Jack Black has a role where he can really flourish and just kind of be himself, which not that he ever isn't himself in a movie, it seems, but when he can really tone into that, that's a good role for him. School Rock classic. I Miranda Cosgrove just being bitchy to bitch is also fun.
Yeah. The I know Mike White, the guy who's supposed to be the teacher, Ned Schneebly.
Yep.
He also directed White Lotus, which I just found out.
Yes, he did.
I did not know that. I was like, huh. Didn't even know he directed stuff.
Yeah, no, it was very interesting when I looked that up because I was like, Mike White, why do I know that name? And I was just like, huh.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I think of him as Zombieland. That's what I think of Mike White in.
Yeah.
Well, can a guy just take a dumper in peace?
Yeah.
I think of that one. So it's certainly an interesting thing. I love the back to school vibes, and just that's the dream of wanting to just go into a classroom and not have to do shit and just fuck around and have fun.
It's also a private school, which makes it way more fun that they're breaking all the rules.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just inherently, as a kid, you're gonna fucking love that.
Yeah. Oh, it's tremendous. And a good pickup.
Great music.
And, I mean, that's a kid-friendly movie as well. It's not something...
Oh, for sure.
I have plenty of movies on here that are not kid-friendly, but that is certainly one that I would argue is definitely great. That's a good movie. Good pickup. My number 5. I'm going to start with a heavy hitter right away. Going with The Breakfast Club.
Okay.
One of my favorite movies. Giant comfort movie for me. It's one of those that if things happen and I just need something on, I'm like, fuck it, let's watch The Breakfast Club. And then I always just end up paying attention to the movie and not doing the thing I was going to do during the movie. I just love I like the deeper meanings behind it, where it's very easy to just write a lot of those 80s movies at the time, especially those Brat Pack movies, as like, they're just talking to kids of this day. It's like, no, it's really a lot deeper than that.
It's a lot more universal. Yeah.
And they do a good job with the characters in which they fit. You think they only fit this one mold of this kind of character or this kind of student or this kind of kid, but really there's enough nuance to all of them that you can find something to connect with, where you can find something to connect with with all 5.
Yeah, that's like the whole point of the movie is breaking out of the stereotypes that you fall into in high school.
Right, and it's extremely fun to see the interplay, and it's also crazy to know half the ages of those kids were like Anthony Michael Hall and Molly Ringwald are pretty much that age at that time, or like just barely
Yeah,
past it.
they're pretty young.
Whereas like Judd Nelson is already an adult technically,
Yeah,
and like he's a younger adult, but he's still an adult. Emilio Estevez is getting in there. Ali Sheedy's a little bit older too, so it's a really interesting um, interplay.
which of the five characters is your favorite?
My favorite? Oh, that's difficult because
I'm always gonna go. I'm always gonna go with the weirdo,
I was
Ellie
gonna
Sheehy.
I was
Yeah,
gonna say Allison might win for me. I think she's great. Part of me just loves Bender because it's Bender, and
yeah,
he's just a prick. But then when you look back at it and you're like, that's some inappropriate stuff you're doing there, Bender. I wouldn't recommend doing that, and
yeah.
or I would think you're a real fucking douchebag if you did half that shit. Especially like when he's on under the table, like fucking around with Claire. You're like, doesn't
Bender,
age as well.
Bender is one of those people where you see the class clown in an opposite school and you think he's funny, but then when he's actually at your school, you're like, you're a douche.
Very much so. Like you see that, and it. I think what I attach to is part of my teen years. I didn't do anything crazy in terms of like, I started smoking or drinking or
Nor
partying
did
like
I.
that. But I certainly, in our family specifically, just kind of became a rebel without a cause, just because from time to time, with especially our parental unit in flux during that time. So that I definitely connect with, where you're just like, you're just being so difficult. And I'm like, yeah, I remember that, where I was just like, no, you're wrong. I'm just not even going to be remotely flexible. That kind of teen,
Yeah,
and I see that in Bender a lot. Um, but I really like the idea of how much pressure they're put on by other, by those outside forces of their parents and everything's.
yeah,
And I really like that and appreciate that by all five characters. So there's definitely something to be said for all of them. And classic shot, classic ending, one of the best '80s songs ever coming through with it. Gotta love it.
yeah. Yeah, you
Yeah,
can't go wrong with John Hughes.
you can't. It's a shame that we don't have John Hughes to this day. 'Cause
Yeah,
I'd love to see what he could do with the social media world. I'd love to see what he could do with
yeah,
that
that would
tech.
be fun. Okay, my number four. You already mentioned Mean Girls.
Okay. What about Mean Girls really pulls you in this direction?
Well, first off, the big thing is Regina George is just one of the best characters ever written.
It's a great villain. It's a great
Yeah,
villain.
she's like such a huge bitch in that movie that you kind of admire it almost.
It's unabashed. Yeah, you like
Yeah,
it's a constant, and that you can understand why people would gravitate to it because it's a constant.
yeah. I love like all the little montages they show, like when they cut the nipple area of the shirt of Regina George, and then everyone's going around school with it like
Yeah.
that. She's starting the trends.
What I think is Mean Girls is the movie that takes you from the transition of Lindsay Lohan being a kid to Lindsay Lohan being an adult, which is so funny because
Yeah.
it's a teen movie, but
Hmm.
it's the clear delineation where not that she all like of that age she was such a hot starlet, but it is so fun to like see that moment and you go back and you're like, wow, yeah, this was a star, and this is like
Yeah.
kind of her last big thing until the tragedy of her life
Yeah.
begins to
I mean,
spiral down.
she had the potential to be like a giant movie star.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason that still when she shows up in things, it still makes you pause and go, huh, okay. Like, even if it's a
Yeah.
dumb Hallmark movie or dumb Netflix movie, if Lindsay Lohan's on the thumbnail for it, you're kind of like, okay. Like,
I, I avoid those Hallmark movies at all
Oh, absolutely.
costs.
I don't like them either. Unfortunately, I did just have to watch a Christmas movie this past year, I believe, or past 2 years ago, with Ab and our friend Laura, and it had Lindsay Lohan. I can't remember. Is it The Christmas Wish? One of those dumb Netflix movies, where like, of course, she has amnesia after a fucking like ski accident or some shit like that. It's
Of course.
ridiculous. It's fucking ridiculous. Um, it's like overboard, not nearly as admirable or fun. Um,
Yeah. I mean, you're never going to get a Kurt Russell in a Hallmark type movie.
right. Because if you're gonna have a highly problematic movie like that, you need to have the
You need some
actors.
charm.
You need the actors that have the charm and charisma to make you forget about that. That's kind of what is. It's kind of like going back to Breakfast Club with Bender or with um, some of this Mean Girl stuff. Is it played just for comedy? You need the people to make you buy into the story, not buy into the reality of it. Because
Mhm.
if you don't have Judd Nelson being charming in that movie, you just go, what a fucking twat with Bender. Same thing.
Yeah.
If you don't have Rachel McAdams just being such a steadfast bitch in this movie, you can't buy it. And if you don't have Lindsay Lohan's very very convincing story of becoming a plastic, you can't buy it. It's just like, okay, whatever, another bitchy
Yeah.
movie.
And there's so many like just small roles that really are great.
Yeah.
Like the principal, Amy Poehler and Tina Fey both are in there.
hmm
It's just an all around great cast.
It's a great cast of future stars to come. Like it's one
Yeah.
of those movies that's tremendous when you look back at. It's the same thing I feel in a different context with. Did you ever watch Wet American Summer? Wet
No, I
Hot
didn't do
American
that.
Summer. So
Oh, of course.
yeah. So again, it's one of those movies that it cast every young star of the time before they were
Yeah.
stars. And when you look back, you're like, how in the fuck was this movie made with this cast? Like, this doesn't make sense that this
Yeah.
cast is like that.
Yeah,
Um,
you can tell they're just pulling all like the improv talent that they can,
right. Um,
and that works.
right. And so here it's all four of those. Lacey Chabert still has a career, and she's still an engaging actress to a degree. And if that's your weakest of your main four, it's pretty good.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
all four are really like good, distinct characters too.
right. And I think that's really hard to balance in a high school movie that's supposed to be clicky, and you're dealing with a click
Yeah,
because it's just, you know,
well, yeah, and it's just like the whole message of conformity and like the pressure you get from high school.
right.
It really shows high school in a bad light, which is true.
No, I mean that's the biggest thing is when like I didn't have a bad high school experience by any stretch of imagination, but I can certainly look back and just go, hmm,
Yeah, I guess
I
that's
don't know
more of
about
it.
that
Yeah,
one. I don't know about that one. Like, yeah, I can see where that was. Like, why would I have made that choice? Why would I have made that choice? Oh, because even when I didn't think I was that big of a peer pressure kind of guy, no, I was, and like,
yeah,
because we all are in that age group. So
yeah. You just have to fall. It's just nature.
yeah, it's a very interesting mindset, and it's a great movie you can pick up at any time and be happy with,
True. Yeah.
uh, and just good all around fun movie there. All right, so we're gonna start with my four here. I'm gonna go National Lampoon's Animal House. It is. I wanted to get away from some of the, like I said, I wanted to get away from just high school movies or anything else. I wanted to try to hit every level of school in some way, shape, or form on my list. So, and it's all what we appreciate. Animal House just reminds me of not giving a fuck during college because that's where I was, where I was just trying to get through. I wasn't trying to flourish. I wasn't trying to succeed. I was just trying to get through at many
Yeah.
points in my college career and just enjoy my time. That's the big thing I think that's lost in a lot of modern society schooling is you don't have a good time in school anymore. You just kind of like suffer.
Mhm.
And for a lot of people, or even down to the elementary school level, so to get a 70s level comedy based upon the 60s just before the free love movement or just at the beginning stages of free love movement where they don't give a fuck about anything, great. And yes, it's inappropriate for the day and time that we're in. It's got plenty of jokes that you're like, wouldn't fly today, but at the same
Yeah,
time, just great all around fun here. I adore Animal House.
yeah, I definitely don't have the fondness that most people do for it because I think I watched it when I was just too young.
Yeah,
I was probably like 14,
right.
and it
I
was just I don't know. I didn't find it amusing. A lot of it.
it's certainly a movie in which I just love the well, John Belushi is just great in this film.
Yeah,
Just being John Belushi, and then I just love the cavalcade of characters and just constantly fucking with stuff just for the sake of fucking with stuff. Uh,
yeah, true. Yeah,
I adore that aspect of it. I think I first saw it when I was about 16, 17, so I was right at the age where you really want to start getting into that because you're starting to think about college and all that kind of stuff.
yeah,
And as someone who already at that point in life thought he was never going to college, just getting the bunch of people in this movie that didn't give a fuck about being in school, they just cared about getting together. I didn't care about drinking, but they just cared about drinking, partying, having fun. Like, that was the image of college for a lot of stuff for me, and I was just like, yeah, I get that. I would, and it's the level of, wouldn't you always want to do that? And I'm like, yeah, I would. I'd love to just fuck around and not
yeah,
give a shit at all. Um,
yeah. That's a good way of looking at it. Actually, is I wish I could be more like this.
yeah, when it's also just the classics of the hijinks.
Certain aspects of the story, I should
Yeah,
say.
absolutely. Like, and also I love how brave that movie is, especially in a modern context, in which the random throwing of ideas of someone just out of their head going, "Wouldn't that be funny?" And you look back and you're like, "Who the fuck thought that would be a good thing to try?" And they tried it, and it works in this movie just because they embrace the absurdity. They really embrace that
Yeah,
National Lampoon's level of absurdity, where he's looking through the obituaries to find a date, and and he's just like, "Oh, this is perfect. This is my in to get more dates." And you're like, that is so fucked and twisted, but because it's told through the charm of National Lampoons and you know they're not taking it seriously, um, and you get Tim Matheson in his early charming days really just being able to just be charming, you're like, yeah, it's funny here.
yeah.
Because you're like, I
You
can't
know,
believe someone would do that.
yeah, and you never get like raunchy comedies anymore.
Yeah.
Like they're pretty much extinct at this point.
And that's the thing. I just saw a clip of Vince Vaughn on Hot Ones, and he very much is like
Yeah,
that. And
yeah,
it's a shame because I don't want to say we grew up in a golden age of them because they were always a thing since really the 70s,
yeah,
and really into the 80s. You're getting a lot of raunchy comedy, but we kind of got the last vestige of that of our teen years, where
mm.
you're getting you know Anchorman, The Step Brothers, Super Bad, like Knocked Up,
Well,
like all that kind of stuff.
how many times did we watch Wedding Crashers?
Right,
It must have been 100.
right, like Wedding Crashers, like you're getting all those old schools in there, which another would be. I don't have old school on my list, but would be a good movie to have on this list. Um,
Yeah, that's good honorable mention.
and, and then we just kind of get these like I can't even remember the last time I went to a theater to see a comedy movie.
Yeah,
The
I would
comedy,
have to.
I would say the comedy movie's kind of like the first victim of the streaming platform. Like
Yeah,
rom coms and comedies don't exist anymore because they go straight to streaming. They don't get made to go to
yeah,
theaters because they weren't, which is so crazy because they were profitable because they were cheap to make. Um,
yeah. They're not expensive, which would seem like an incentive to put it in theaters, but
right,
yeah, what are you
exactly.
gonna do?
But I love that raunchy comedy style of the 70s and the 80s when there is a part of me. Obviously, I think you need to be cognizant of the issues of today, um, and be aware of that. There's easy ways to make a raunchy comedy without it being offensive outwardly to people. You got to toe the line, but not be outwardly offensive. But I just love that unabashed style of the 70s and 80s, where it was just, if it's funny, we're doing it. because,
Mm,
and then as an audience
yeah.
member, you can make the decision of whether you want to watch it or not. And it was just like, if it's funny,
Yeah.
we're doing it.
The way I've done it recently, my barometer on comedy is joke and making fun of people, then that's fine. Like, if you have malice, that's intent to just make fun of people for who they are.
Right.
But if you're just joking about something, there's no harm in it.
Right. And I think that's the interesting. It's something that just came up with Deadpool and Wolverine, where if you really look at it, sadly, in a superhero movie is the best raunchy comedies we've got in the past 10 years. Is pretty much the Deadpool trilogy. They kind of
Yeah.
own that. They own that realm,
Yeah.
and they just do it within the superhero zeitgeist of today. But Kevin Feige just said this about Deadpool and Wolverine, or strictly Deadpool, because of Ryan Reynolds and Sean Levy, in which they never punch down. They
Mm,
constantly punch up, and when you're punching up, people can always see the humor. But when you start punching down, that's just gratuitous to hurt
yeah.
people, and it's not funny. So that's why inherently, like, that works. Why Deadpool
Mm,
works, because if you look, he's always punching up at the big guy. He's never going after. He's never going
yeah.
after little guys in the joke to just tear them down. So
Yeah.
it's a very interesting thing to think about, and I think it goes well with your theory um, on comedy in general. But
Yeah.
I love that 80s, 70s style of comedy, just saying, fuck it, we
We're
think it's funny, so we're doing it.
well, we're gonna stay there because my next one is Grease,
All right.
which also will be talked about on the box office series because that was number one in
78.
78, I
Yep.
believe. Yeah.
Or 77, because didn't Superman technically it's 78, even though it should have been 77? No, 79.
No,
We got
it's
79.
79.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
of the box office release. Yeah, 77 Star Wars. It, our mother would be certainly proud.
Yes.
It's our mom's second favorite movie. I only know
The
it's her
the funny
second
thing
favorite
is,
movie because I was flabbergasted when I was with her. It was almost like a decade ago. We were hanging out, and we just had time to kill, and she was staying over at the house, and she was like, "No, what?" I was like, "What is your favorite movie anyway?" She's like, "Turner and Hooch," and I was like, interesting poll, Mom. Like, I
oh,
never heard that in my life, never knew it, never watched it with her. So like, I remember,
yeah,
like, she's the one who actually introduced us to Goonies. Um, she's the one that introduced us to Grease. Like, so those are the ones that I'm like, have very strong memories of Mom with those movies.
yeah. I
Um,
remember, I remember just hating Grease as a kid because it was just like it just seemed so uncool to like what your mom likes.
Interesting, because I will say that was a fun thing for me and Mom, where you know Mom and I didn't really connect on a lot of stuff at that time, and we didn't spend a whole lot of just one-on-one time together outside of like random trips to places because you'd stay back with Dad and I'd go with Mom a lot. And Grease always spoke to me. I always thought it was fun. I always thought it was cool. But I love cheese. I have no problem with the perfect amount of cheese, and I'm all for it. Or a little bit of cheese,
Yeah,
I'm all for it. And I think Grease has that in spades.
yeah. Not everyone likes a musical, but I always enjoy them if they're good.
Right.
Like, I have no problem with musicals at all, and like literally every song in Grease is good to great.
Oh, absolutely. And the other thing that I think is super interesting about Grease is that is a movie in which you can show it to a kid and they will not understand how funny it actually is.
Hmm.
And they can just enjoy it for the spectacle and the musical
Yeah,
and the learning of classic tropes of high school and stuff. But when you rewatch it as an adult and you start picking up more of the language cues, you start picking up more of the hints of
yeah,
stuff, you're like, oh shit, this is a little bit darker than I thought it was. Like, this is
yeah,
actually quite interesting.
yeah. As a kid, I definitely did not understand the double entendre and stuff.
Yeah, so there's
Like,
so much double entendre in this movie,
yeah,
and it's extremely fun to see with Grease.
yeah. Which is also, I think, kind of lends to the movie because it's set in the 50s, so it's like a more repressive time.
Yeah, Well, you're in that I like Ike, white picket fence America time,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you're smack dab in that, and where like the greaser is looked at as the other, and you're like,
Mm.
really?
Yeah.
Like that's
Especially when he looks like John Travolta
right.
in 1978.
Right, and it's so funny, like, because a movie that didn't make my list, it's one of my absolute favorites, and this is one of my absolute favorites, but it just doesn't evoke back to school times for me. This kind of just evokes teen angst for me. Is Rebel Without a Cause, and seeing the greasers in that movie and
Mm.
speaking to the youth, and the greasers are classic Americana. They're not the other.
Yeah.
So to see the 50s kind of treat greasers as the other, because in popular culture the true other of the time based on the culture of the country wasn't ever explored. So it's just such an interesting facet to see. But I adore Grease. It's so fun.
Yeah. And all the like they're not the most successful actors of all time, but everyone in the cast is good in that movie.
They all have distinct characters. You can't say
Yeah.
they don't. Um, and it's really fun because Grease is another avenue, much like Breakfast Club, in which to view yourself and to see who you actually connect with. Because everyone wants to think they were this or they were that, and they were probably one of the bit players. Uh,
Yeah.
like like again watching this with mom. Mom definitely identifies with Rizzo. That's her
Mm.
girl. Like that's who she identifies with, and mom actually does have some of those traits, but it's funny to see like her believe she's like Rizzo, and you can see it. But then if you look internally at yourself with the character lens, you're kind of like, I see myself in this character, and you're like, I don't think I actually am that character.
Yeah.
No, I'm more one of the funny sidekicks. I'm not John Travolta. I'm not
Oh, yeah, no one's Danny Zuko, let's be honest.
like you know you know. There's no Kaneki. There's no Zuko.
Yeah.
We're getting into Putsy territory. We're getting into like
Yeah.
those
Sure.
kinds of guys. Like I think if I were gonna be accurate to one of the Thunderbirds, I'm more of like the blonde kid that ends up with the girl that just always wants to eat.
Mm.
I'm like, that's
Mhm.
probably where I'm at. Like,
Yeah, I think that's probably where a lot of like introverts are at
yeah, where he's just
because
like just
he's
kind.
definitely the weakest of all the what
The Thunderbirds, the T-birds,
Thunderbird.
yeah.
Yes.
And it's just fun to see like the gangs that are made up of like, oh, we're the Pink Ladies, we're the Thunderbirds, oh, the Scorpions are at the other school. It's like
Yeah.
this is our turf, and you're like, it's a high school, like it's not a
Yeah.
war,
I also
it's a high school.
I love how the big dance
Yeah,
is shot. It's great.
yeah,
It feels exactly like what like an idyllic school dance was.
yeah. No, and it's also accurate with like
Yeah.
teachers having to go around and constantly discipline because like I went to all those dances in high school, and yeah, there's plenty of people going around and they're just like making out on the dance floor. And I'm like, even I was like, guys, just leave. Why are you
Yeah.
here? Why are you here to do
It's
this here?
Yeah, it's also a time period where everyone knew how to dance or learned how.
Yeah,
So it's always more interesting to see that.
right. And there's something very interesting and fun to look at that. That's both Grease and Back to the Future do a really good job of highlighting that period. And Back to the Future was one I almost put on this list, but I was like, it doesn't give me back to school vibes. It just gives me
Yeah.
awesome vibes. But Ab threw that one out there as well. But yeah, Grease is a phenomenal choice. That was your three, right?
Yep.
Three. I'm actually gonna go completely opposite. It's a movie from our childhood, and it's extremely child friendly. One of the things I always think about with back to school is the starting of team sports. It's just that
Hmm.
period, that August September period when you're getting to know new people, but you're getting back together with your crew, and you all got to kind of come together in a way.
Yeah.
1995's Big Green from Disney. That gives me
Oh,
such harsh back to school vibes in the best ways possible. I
now we're
adore the Big Green.
talking. Now we're talking, I mean, greatest movies ever made. I love The Big Green, and I will never apologize for loving it.
No, you shouldn't. And the Big Green is the the tail end of the sports kids movies of the 90s. And people, if you actually look at it, like our childhood was dominated by sports and movies. That's kind of what we did, was sports and
Mm-hmm.
movies. And you get, in successive years, you have Mighty Ducks, Sandlot's 93, Little Giants is 94, Big Green's 95. Like you get
Yeah,
four major sports back to back to back to back to fill that 90s kid vibe. And it's such a rewarding experience. It's actually really heartfelt. And now, especially with the border crisis going on, that I was amazed watching it, coming back to it after years, because again, I up until recently I'd worked in childcare. So when I was looking for a movie that from my past that could probably help me connect with the kids a little bit more, I would show them Big Green. I remember the first time I watched it with them in recent times. I was like, holy shit, this movie actually does touch on a real issue. But it's not the focal point, but it touches on it and it's a real thing and it hits home now
yeah,
because, you know, the modern idea of the border crisis and the political talking point that it is. And to see that played out in a live action Disney movie from the 90s when they weren't trying to do super offensive stuff
hmm
is actually quite remarkable.
yeah, yeah. I've already shared this with you, but I might as well share it again.
Yeah.
Um, I love the Big Green so much that on my FIFA career mode, I made my team the Big Green,
Fuck yeah.
and then I made custom characters for Juan Morales.
Hell yeah.
What's the goalie's name? Is it?
It's not Ham because that's Sandlot.
It's
Uh,
like
Larry.
Larry.
Yeah, it's Larry.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I remember making his too. I was like, I gotta have that redhead in the goal.
it's it has sports movie vibes that's really fun, but you really get it really encapsulates the magic of being a kid on a team. That's what I really like
Mhm.
about it. And it's the more inspiring take of what happens when a community comes together. You know, as someone who worked in childcare, when you're always trying to create that community and be a positive influence for them, the Big Green's a perfect example of like that's ideal is what I want to do. Is how do I come
Yeah,
in and make a positive impact to the point where like they really want to be a part of a community and get better themselves and get better as a group. So Big Green just gives me all those like not
yeah,
warm fuzzy 90s feelings of nostalgia of going back to school.
yeah. And all those like fantasy sequences where Larry's imagining
Yes.
all the like the knights and what else is
The
it?
Terminators, the Walking Dead, the Buccaneers. They're all absurd. I remember
Like
watching as a kid and just going, "You're afraid of these? Okay, but it's funny because it's Disney magic.
it's yeah, it's so entertaining.
High quality film. Highly recommend, especially to a soccer fan. The Big Green's just
Yeah.
a great way to reconnect with what made you fall in love with the sport in the first place. It's
Mhm.
just being with your friends, kicking a ball around, and enjoying your time. Big Green has that in spades.
Yeah.
Anyway, I wanted to highlight all levels of school here as much as possible. And
Yeah,
Big Green
and
was one of the first movies I thought of where I was like, that gives me back to school vibes.
yeah, and considering the cast is like 90% kids, it's still pretty good. Like good, pretty good acting.
Yeah, it's pretty good acting. It's convincing for kids, and it does. It also, I feel, fits really well in a modern context because again it's Disney in the 90s, so it's nothing really offensive is going to come out of it, but it's a mixed cast where you can find a lot of walks of life in there. You're not just getting the one token black kid.
Mm.
You know, this is actually a pretty diverse cast with, you know, black members of the team, Hispanic members of the team, Asian members of the team. It's not just a bunch of
Yeah,
whiteys and one
and
kid that's another race. And
yeah,
so
and
it is
like
quite interesting.
in different like classes and stuff.
Yeah, and so it's actually a pretty welcoming movie in a lot of ways, but it doesn't lose the authenticity of like small town Texas, where
Hmm.
they don't try to do something where out of I don't agree with anyone who really argues like diversity hires or anything like that. But it is kind of funny sometimes when you see a movie and you're like, oh, randomly because we needed to hit your idea of a diversity quota, we got a kid that has no chance of probably ever being in this small town in Texas. Like
Yeah.
what? Like you don't have that problem. It's all just very believable, and it's a believable mixed race cast, which is really fun, and allows you to connect with a lot more characters from any walk of life. So it's an interesting
Yeah.
movie.
Now that I'm considering it, that storyline with is it Katie
Kate,
and her oh yeah, and her single father, that's actually like pretty real
yeah,
for a Disney movie.
that's where I think the '90s get slept on a lot for making movies that on the surface level Big Green's just a kids movie about soccer.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's trying to capitalize on the growing popularity of soccer in the '90s into the early 2000s. But when you actually look at that movie, they cover real stuff, and it's something in which the criticism always is, oh, they don't make movies like they used to. I've never really seen, and I've seen a lot of kids movies because of my time of work. I've never really seen another kids movie go into that level of stuff and do it with a really nice balance where someone's dealing with a real issue, you're seeing a payoff to it, that is rewarding and real.
Yeah, that character arc for the dad is like impressive.
It's that is a movie that I think because of the time it comes out in and the studio that um, puts it out, that's a movie that a lot of people would probably just go like, ah, oh, passable movie. And if it was released today, as is, it would surely, obviously, people would say, oh, that's outdated. But a lot of people would probably get on board and be like, oh, I see that with, single parents and struggling economics. And it's a good movie for the time that we're in. So I think it'd be a well
Yeah.
reviewed movie if it was released today. So I adore the Big Green. And I know you love the Big Green.
Yeah.
That's not a problem. So,
Yeah, that and Little Giants were my movies growing up.
oh, I still have it. It pains me. I will. It'll get redone before I leave. So, we are recording this much earlier than release because I'm going on vacation. Just 2 days ago, prior to this being recorded, was the first time in like 5 years I didn't have Little Giants downloaded on my tablet because I was editing so much and recording so many videos. I needed to free up as much space as possible. Um, but I'm going to download it immediately because it's still a Microsoft file that I purchased like 7 years ago. So I
Yeah.
was like, no, 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 no. That'll get back on before I leave to Alaska, but I don't go anywhere without Little Giants. I need Little Giants available to me at all times because
Good choice.
it's a movie that no matter what, I can turn it on and always just be happy and connect with.
Yeah. Oh, actually, you just made me think of another honorable mention. Casper, '90s movies. Casper.
Almost made my list. I adore Casper. Casper is something that
Yeah.
I absolutely love.
Everyone, everyone talks shit about it, but I still enjoy it.
They can go talk shit all they want. I fucking adore Casper. It's an absolute
Yeah.
favorite of mine, and people that don't like it, they can go fuck themselves. Um, Tremendous movie.
Uh. Okay. My number two is Dead Poet Society.
Okay,
It's
a little bit different than when I was
in my
going.
it's in my top 10 of best movies ever or favorite movies ever. It's
Wow.
probably right around 10, but I I first saw this in high school, and I think we both did with Mrs. Harges. Remember her?
Oh, Miss Arches, yeah.
Yeah, I remember her showing it to us in English class, and I didn't really connect with it all that much.
Right.
But but then like a month after we watched it in school, I rewatched it, and I loved it.
I don't know if I watched that with. I think it was Melissa. Uh, we were homies. Harches and I were homies. Because she. This is not to brag. Um, because who cares if you're in an honors class in high school, right? But
Yeah.
I came fresh out of an honors class to her class that I dropped because I couldn't stand the teacher and I just couldn't stand what she was doing. And I remember her pulling me aside and she's like, it was so abundantly clear she was happy to get an honors level student in her class because she was used to just getting the people that just like she had to spoon feed them everything just to get them through the class. But she would actually try to challenge you a little bit, and that's what I really appreciate
Yeah.
about her class.
I remember.
And I remember her
I
pulling her
remember.
aside and being like, "You know, you like, did you turn this assignment in?" I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "Well, you have a 0. I thought that was really wrong, so that must be my mistake. Let's just get you re-upped because you legitimately threw off the curve for the class the last 2 times you did assignments for me." I was like, "Good to know." She's like, I was like, "Well, I am an honors level student. I couldn't stand my last teacher," and she just goes, "I'm glad to have you. Just get back in the class. We'll get your assignment taken care of later." I was like, "Okay."
Yeah. And in that class, I also had the classic, "Oh, you're nothing like your brother," because they all at the beginning start thinking, "Oh, he must be just like his brother, really outgoing and talkative."
Well, that's the thing. If I'm on an equal playing field with people, I love to joke around and put everybody at ease and talk and share my thoughts. When I'm not that, I am super introverted and like to keep to myself. And
Well,
to get to I can only imagine you in school after getting one of the classes I was very talkative and my personality really comes out. I can only imagine the hell that you went through sometimes with that shit.
yeah, it happened quite often. A lot more in middle school, but
I just think that's a
um,
fun conversation to have with back to school conversations because it's the truth. There's so many people in this world that they went to the same schools as their siblings and they got the you're nothing like your sibling. Like I did that all the
yeah,
time as childcare provider working with schools or working around schools. I was like, that sibling, they're going places. The other one,
yeah,
oh, okay.
yeah. Um, but I remember when Robin Williams passed away. This is the first movie I went and watched because I think this is his best movie, probably his best performance.
Says a lot about his career as well.
And I mean, this is like just pure Robin Williams. There are so many scenes where he's just being Robin Williams that, like, I love his comedy. And he has, like, real heart in a lot of movies. And I think that's kind of what's missing nowadays is, like, that person who can be extremely funny, but then also really give it some gravitas.
Yeah, you don't see. I think that's why we connect with people that we do in movies is they have something to them that is just magnetic. You have to be around that. Robin Williams had that in spades,
Yeah,
and it's such a shame, the way he passed and everything that happened because he still had so much more to offer and so much more to give. Uh, to the world of entertainment, the world of movies,
yeah.
and just the
You know
world
where
in
I
general with how he does stuff. But Dead Poet Society echoes that so much.
you know where I was when I found out he died?
No idea.
Tortilla Flats.
Which we both worked at, which I'm sure you got another "you're nothing like your brother" comment. So.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. Yeah, but I remember going into the walk-in and just crying for a second
Oh wow,
because I was
okay.
like, it was like so deeply shocking to me because it's like he wasn't that old.
No.
He could have lived for 20 at least 20 years
Yeah.
more, and it's so tragic that it's just. I mean, especially with someone with depression, you just sympathize with him so
Absolutely.
much.
Absolutely. It's something in which the there is no silver lining in suicide. There's no silver lining to any of that. If you are forced to be put into a situation where you have to find a silver lining in that, people that are aware that they're having a problem when someone else does that, the only silver lining is sometimes that's the motivation to say, "Oh God, like look at all they had, and they're suffering from something similar to me, and they decided to end it. I don't want to end it. I need to figure this situation out before I get to that point or before I get to a sad point in life."
Yeah.
And it's certainly something in which hopefully that just reminds people when you need help, go get help. Uh, just talk to somebody,
Yeah,
figure it out. Try to find a
and it's always
professional as the best you possibly can.
and it's always more tragic when the person was clearly like a kind soul. Like Robin Williams seemed like a genuinely good person, so it's like
The comedy
it
world
always
might
gets harder.
argue. The comedy world might argue a little bit different. Apparently, he was quite a joke thief. Um,
Well, yeah, I have heard that allegation.
however, when you're looking at just straight performance, you can't find like even the people that have said that about him in the comedy world. They're like, he's still Robin Williams. Like it doesn't like it sucks that he would take material from people in the straight up comedy world, but when it comes to performance, he is a one of one who cannot be replicated, and without his ability to perform, you don't you don't get that level of success on some of the stuff that they're
Yeah,
doing. And to see it in Dead Poet Society with it all happening is
yeah.
certainly
You
another.
have um, what's the guy's name from House?
Oh,
You
I know,
know that
I
actor?
know the actor that you're talking about.
Yeah, his whole character is dealing with depression and the pressure on him that he wants to succeed in his dreams. But you got Red Foreman just being like, "No, fuck you. You're gonna be a professional. You're not gonna be an actor."
Right, and it's certainly something in which it's iconic. It's one of those movies you don't realize how much you know of it, even when you don't have never watched it. I never realized, oh, Captain My Captain was famous for Dead Poet Society prior to Dead
Yeah,
Poet Society, and when I saw that in the movie, I was like, oh shit,
yeah.
okay.
That's a top 10 moment for me in cinema history.
And so it's such a rewarding film on so many different levels because it reminds you again on how it reminds you of the importance of somebody other than just straight up family that can happen in your life, where if you find that person that can support you or you're that supportive person to someone else, it's a gift to have, and
Yeah,
you have to roll with it, be happy with it as best you
yeah,
possibly can because it matters.
yeah. And it always helps, like, because I identify so heavily with Ethan Hawke's character in that movie that it's just like it's really easy to put myself there.
Yeah, and so it's such a character driven piece that it's hard to deny the magnetism of um, Dead Poet Society. I like how you went to like top 10 favorite movies. It's a very deep movie that's very personal. Uh,
Oh,
Polar difference on mine, but we're good.
also, that maybe should be another list we do. Top moments in cinema history.
Ooh, that'd be so
It'd be
difficult
really,
because it's so
yeah, it'd be really
subjective.
hard.
Well, you already saw it on my top 10 comic book movies that I would argue Avengers Endgame is up there with the portal scene. So it'd be very fun to see our differences and how we. That's really fun to just subjectively say, oh, this is a top 10 moment in cinema, and you're like,
Yeah,
well, is it, or is it to you, or how do you view
yeah, it's
that?
personal.
But that'll be a very fun list to get down the road. But we're gonna switch a little bit of gears with my number two pick. Incredibly different film than the one you brought up, but it is one of my absolute comfort movies that I can just watch on repeat over and over and over again. It's Accepted, movie from 2006,
Oh,
comedy. I fucking adore Accepted.
yeah. I was obsessed with that movie when I was like 12 years old.
Mm-hmm.
It just hit so good and so well with me.
It's one of the last movies I think that was successful, produced by Tom Shadyac, who did a lot of Adam Sandler stuff. I'm not necessarily a huge Adam Sandler fan, but you can't say that Wheelhouse didn't play well, and Shadyac was a part of that.
Yeah.
You have three really talented. You have an incredibly talented cast here with all great character actors, but you have three young stars, all as they're coming to the forefront of cinema, where you have Justin Long, who is the least successful of the three, and then you have Jonah Hill and Blake Lively also in this movie,
Yeah.
as they're
Oh, I
all
think
trying to make a name for themselves. So it's quite interesting.
I think Justin Long is one of the most underrated. Like he has real charm.
Yes.
He's
And
one of the only reasons I will watch that fucking Live Free or Die Hard movie.
well, he I think that was another classic of he did that the year right after Accepted. And Justin Long is one of those that actors that I think not necessarily disappears, but he kind of picks his spots in his career of when to come out and
Yeah.
when to do stuff. And I wish he would just kind of be more of a. I think he would be great in a secondary like superhero role where he's not the main guy, but his charm alone can make him a really fun, character to be around and to have as a part of your ensemble in a superhero film, or just could get back into the role of some of the other things. I have not watched his new Goosebumps yet, and Goosebumps is something obviously the two of us
Mhm.
adore. The 2014 movie with Jack Black is an honorable mention on my list as well, for back
I,
to
I've
school.
not I've not seen any of the newer Goosebumps
I
stuff.
well, I,
Only the classic.
yeah, so I it just hits home for, and I still go back. I'm probably gonna download episodes of Goosebumps for the trip just so I can have something to zone out to and have fun with. But Accepted is such a fun movie with such a ridiculous concept that works so well in comedy, where one lie spirals into an enormous problem, but is
Yeah.
also in a way the greatest gift that you ever got. And I just love the absurdity of, okay, I need to make a fake acceptance letter so my parents get off my back. Okay. And then it turns into, oh wait, we need to do this to make this convincing. Okay, we'll take that next step. We need to do this. We need to rent a facility to make it believable. And then it's, wait, you made this website functional?
Well, the amount of effort he goes through, it'd be 10 times easier to just study to go to college for real.
Right. And that's the funny part about all of it. But I really love the grassroots nature of it, the building of community of it. That's part of the beauty of going back to school is you get your community back. As much as your summer break is awesome, and we always had a community during summer. It wasn't like we were the kid that was isolated due to geography. We saw plenty of our friends during summer, but there's so many people, especially kids in rural areas or kids that just geographically they're kind of stuck because they don't have a car or their parents can't take them anywhere, they don't have access to public transit, that summers for them suck because the first
Mm.
5 days are great, you can do whatever you want, but then the next 2-3 months they're just dying because they don't have connection with their community.
Yeah.
um, and so it's really fun to see the community building aspects of this and showing the impact of people learning from people. You don't always have to learn in a great way. And also, one of the greatest pieces of wisdom I've ever learned, it comes from this movie where Lewis Black is like, college is a service industry. And at first you're like, oh, waiting for this one. But the explanation is very true, and it's the same way I viewed
Yeah.
everything in childcare. It's the same way I view education. I view it as that. It's like you are signing up to serve us. You know, you need to give people what they want. I think it's ridiculous the way colleges now have gone to the point where they have attendance requirements and all that. I'm like, I'm paying you, and if I choose not to take the service, that's on me because I'm not using what I paid for. Not you telling me that you're not using the service we want you to do, so we're gonna punish you for it. I'm like, fuck you. If I don't need to show up to class, I shouldn't have to. I'm an adult that's paying you to be here. Shut the fuck up. Like, it's a very interesting way to look at stuff. So it's a personal bone on that one, but then the message is also better with other stuff too.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, the sentiment at the end really works for me.
Yeah,
Because a lot of times it's just like you just roll your eyes at when they try to get serious and sentimental in a comedy.
certainly. You have to roll your eyes sometimes at some of the sentiment in some comedies, and you don't in this, because the whole time the one thing you can say is he's steadfast in his conviction that this is a good idea in terms of the community aspects of it. And so when they
Mhm.
when they go up to the school board and get approved for at least a experimental license, you believe it that he's really fighting for
Hmm.
something that he believes in, and that's another reason why this movie does well. You have a true you do kind of have a character arc there. It's a little bit more understated with Justin Long's character. Blake Lively is so charming in this movie. You can fall in love with Blake Lively very easy in this movie. Jonah Hill's experience is another one that just really speaks to a lot of people in that transitional year going into college. So it's very fun and enjoyable movie. By a door accepted. Really easy 90-minute watch. Really
Yeah,
easy watch.
completely agree.
All
All
right,
right,
take us to your
my
number
number
one.
one. It's a little bit of a cheat, but it's still school. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. I
I
I just
fucking knew you were gonna find a way to put this in.
technically I should have put like Prisoner of Azkaban because that's actually the better movie, but I went with the first one just because it's definitely the most back to school-ish
Yes,
because you get a lot of school in it
you do.
because there's so much to set up. Um, yeah, I mean I'm completely biased on this, so it's hard to say like why I love Harry Potter so much.
Right.
And obviously it's problematic now with J.K. Rowling, but I like it despite that, and that it will never change the fact that what those books and movies meant to me.
Right, and it's social issues aside, because obviously I don't have a soft spot for J.K. Rowling from her viewpoint on trans rights,
Yeah,
or I don't have a soft point for someone just because they created something great being a shitty person.
yeah, exactly.
Uh, but I am also capable of putting the blinders on when it comes to separating an art from the artist. It's the same deal. I mean, my childhood hero is Brett Favre, highly problematic human with a lot of problems, and is
Yeah,
currently swept up in a welfare scam case in the second poorest or poorest state in the country. I get it. It's fucking hard sometimes when someone brings you so much joy, and then it turns out the person behind all that joy sucks. It's not
yeah,
great. It's not great. Um, it's certainly something in which I will say this about this movie: as much as it's a cheat, and I fucking knew you were gonna somehow do something like this,
had to.
it perfectly encapsulates what it means to go to school for the first time if you're a timid child.
Yes, that is true.
You are entering a brand new phase of life and a brand new world, and I think it perfectly encapsulates what it means to go to school.
Yeah,
It connects with
like
so many pieces of you always feeling lonely and then having to find your community to not feel that. It's tremendous storytelling.
yeah, and when you really think about it in the real world, how different a world you enter when you go to school for the first time.
Yeah.
Like before that, all you know is like your home, the playground, maybe some friends' houses, and then all of a sudden you're thrown in school where you're going to be there for 8 hours a day
Yep.
for the next fucking 10 years.
Yeah. It is certainly something that is interesting to see and to play with. And especially I do love the it's perfectly timed for the age group it's made for.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not my favorite piece of fantasy ever. I do love Harry Potter. I have very deep affection for it, just like you guys do. But you and my wife have an affection level that I just don't have. Where you
Yeah,
guys have this inked into your skin, you have a full Harry Potter tattoo sleeve. This means a lot to you.
yeah,
Um, and I don't know if there's been a better. I don't know if there's been a better franchise or big media property that has aged with its audience like Harry Potter does. Where
yeah,
Harry Potter keeps you from the time you're a young child to the time you're in a teen and adult because you went on the journey with Harry, Ron, and Hermione in the same way they go through it, and
Yeah.
and they grow up with those similar issues. I think it's one thing that's really going well with Stranger Things as well. As Stranger Things is another thing that
Yeah.
they start off with kid problems, and then they start facing adult problems, and then they get to those tween almost teen years where they're trying to find their identity. Then they have to find their identity again as teens, and they don't have to deal with it. What happens when you deal with romance? What happens when you deal with all this? This is such a perfect encapsulation of that young period in time with Harry going, and it is such a smart choice as a storyteller. I'll give her this credit. Rowling's choice to make it into middle school is brilliant because when you're coming out of fifth grade and you've been there for 5-6 years, especially if you go to kindergarten in the same building like we did, you're confident. You know the landscape. You get to middle school and it's a completely different world and you have to
Yeah.
relearn. So it's a very, very powerful way to tell the coming of age story, connect with the youth of that time.
Yeah. And it'd be a crime to not bring up the amount of talent in that cast is literally insane. It is like the top of the top British actors.
It it's a great movie directed by Chris Columbus, but then to have that cast where even beyond the main three, it's like Richard Harris,
You got
you know,
Richard Harris, Maggie Smith,
Robbie
Alan
Coltrane,
Rickman,
Alan
Robbie
Rickman,
Coltrane,
right? Like
Mark Williams as Mr. Weasley. There's a lot of talent.
they they understood the mission when they cast this movie, and the best part is because they're the highest quality of Britain. They're not fully exposed to the world at that point,
Yeah.
um, and so when you're watching it, even as an adult, unless you're a big movie watcher and big media devourer of the time, you don't have exposure to many of those actors
Mm-hmm.
unless you're from the UK. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I know Robbie Coltrane first through James Bond, but because they
Yeah.
do such a good job transforming him into Hagrid, that it took me until I was in my late teens to be like, oh yeah, that is the same person. Because it's just,
Yeah.
you just accept that he's Hagrid. He's not Robbie Coltrane. He's Hagrid. Um,
Yeah. And like even just like the bit parts like Filch, everyone knows that actor by his look.
yes.
Like you recognize him from Game of Thrones and stuff, obviously now, but like he is such a distinct look that he sticks out, and that's just like a bit part.
Yeah, John Cleese is nearly headless Nick bit part, but
Huh?
it's John.
Yeah,
It's John
yeah,
fucking Cleese, legend,
yeah,
absolute legend, and great casting by the way. Tremendous casting on that one.
yeah. Should have been in the later sequels, but what are you gonna do?
Yeah, right. So but it is such a great allegory for the coming of age story that it works so well. I completely understand why that was your number one. As much as I knew you were gonna sneak fucking Harry Potter in there somewhere.
Yeah,
Actually, I'm gonna be honest. I thought you were gonna try to stay away from it. So in the back of my mind, I knew, but in doing the task, I was like, I don't know, maybe.
well, I had the internal debate to go, okay, should I just go Harry Potter, Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry Potter, Chamber of Secrets, just do the lineup?
Just for funsies.
Yeah,
But no, it's a wonderful film to go along with and enjoy, and really bring up an entire generation of people to where even where our extended family with our niece and nephew, we're already having the discussions of Abs was like, no, I'm going to read Harry Potter with our niece and nephew. I'm going to be the one to do it. I'm going to be the one to introduce them to that world. So it's a really fun and unique experience to get to. Um, I have a completely different vibe on my number one than Harry Potter. I already did mention it in a raunchy comedy. Nothing makes me think more high school than Superbad. Superbad is my number one. It is an absolute favorite of mine. I think it's one of the best comedies of the last 20 years.
Yeah,
I legitimately think it's honestly one of the best comedies of all time. It's
I would
just,
agree.
it speaks so well to the time frame of the characters that it's in. And the real shit that they have to go through that is just dealt so poorly like teens do.
Mm-hmm.
Where teens deal with real problems. People don't give enough credit to young
Sure.
people, especially teens. Teens have real problems. It's just the way they choose to deal with those problems is what minimalizes how people react to them.
Yeah, had that been at the start of the school year, that would have been on my list.
Yeah.
Because I was like, ooh, I really want to put that, but yeah, my
Part of
criteria.
part of the reason I did it also was the second you start school, you immediately start looking forward to the end of the school year,
Yeah.
and you're just dying to go to summer. You're just trying to get back to summer, or you're living for winter break. You're living for that first teacher conference where you get Thursday, Friday off during that Halloween-esque time in October. You're just dying to get to your first break. I was certainly someone who I've always been pretty steadfast. I was never someone who was like, I'm so excited to go back to school. I never was that
Mm.
person. I was always, I want as much time to myself as possible. Day one, sure, it's fun to see everybody,
Not even then.
but I was still just like, this is not an improvement over summer. Summer's so much
Yeah.
better. Breaks are so much better. There's a reason we're all dying for the weekend because it's way better than having to be in this fucking school. And I love that vibe in Superbad, and I love the, again, all great distinct characters
Oh yeah.
that really have a good vibe to them. And what I think is also really smart about that movie, if we're going to give it more credit than just being a really funny movie, is it's incredibly smart to have the two cops that are childish that they look at high school fondly with Bill Hader and Seth Rogen in that role, where they have that moment at the end with McLovin where it's just like, when we were your age, we fucking hated cops.
Yeah.
And they enjoy themselves. And sure, they're morons. That's part of the fun, that's part of the joke.
Yeah.
But the fact that they still have that gives another reason, it gives an audience member another way to connect and to remember those times fondly and to understand why it is so impactful to
Yeah.
have these stories where even if you're an adult that's removed from them, you can still be like, I remember that shit. I remember going through some of that
Yeah.
stuff.
It was also released at a time when it was like the perfect time to release it for us.
Yeah.
Because it's right at that moment where you start getting like your comedy and you find darker things funny now.
Yeah.
And then, like you get into sex and stuff like that. So
Yeah. No, it was perfectly timed for our age group. That's abundantly clear. But it just speaks so well to stuff. And it's timeless. Like, they, outside of that one moment with the cell phone, they don't really have any issues of technology that are going to make something
yeah.
like that hard to hold up in the long term future, not the short term future, because it's still obvious that it's like that. But you get timeless issues of not having a car, not having transportation, trying to make your way through the world, making ridiculous plots up to find ways, making absurd ideas seem logical because you're just desperate to make them have logic to them. So you just come up with any way to make it work. And just such fun stuff. And wild, wild shit. I mean, when the woman when the woman dances on Jonah Hill just because she needs a tampon that is so fucking funny and so brilliant.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's so many iconic moments in the comedy genre in that movie. Like, yeah, when she has the period, blood on his pants, iconic. I love the part where they're in the cop car with McLovin, and Seth Rogen dreams of a world covered in jizz,
Yeah.
so they can arrest the people that actually do the crime.
Yeah.
I love there's also the moment where they're shooting their guns, and then you hear a siren in the background. Oh shit, the cops! They
Yes.
all run.
Uh, that honestly, they steal the show. McLovin is the star of that movie. As much as both Jonah Hill and Michael Cera are perfect in their
Yeah,
roles, and they do such a good job of holding that movie together, McLovin and the cops are the real show stealers there because
yeah,
you're not expecting them to be. Even the subtle, stupid moments of yeah, they're playing. They take their flashlights and they're playing lightsabers with each other. And he's like, you know, Yoda from Attack of the Clones, like. It's the worst Star Wars pull, especially at the time. It's the worst
yeah,
Star
for
Wars
sure.
pull, and that's what he pulls, and you're like, that is such an adult, not tied to reality's answer, and it's it's so fucking funny. And
Yeah, I will, even though it's like, I don't know if it's problematic. I don't think it is, but I will always laugh at that classroom scene where they're cooking.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
always funny. All the stuff Jonah Hill's doing behind Emma Stone.
yeah.
It's always funny.
No, and again, that's childish, stupid stuff. I don't find that offensive in any way, shape, or form,
Yeah,
and I think it ages perfectly well because he's not doing anything to her. He's being a teen boy who's an idiot. And
yeah.
everybody in high school knew a teen boy who was an idiot who thought that was hilarious.
I had a student. He wasn't really my friend
Right.
in my freshman year of math. He did that to a teacher. Like literally in front of the whole class, he was up there behind the teacher doing that shit. And then I'm assuming it was because of Superbad.
I mean, it's a smart decision, but it it is certainly something that just works so well. There are so many moments of I just love the even the early running where you're just running in gym class and they just shit on gym class. And you know, we love gym class. We took extra gym classes because
Yeah,
we didn't give a fuck. We just wanted to enjoy our day. But just the amount of people that are like, I'm not trying. It's gym
yeah, and then
class.
you get Dave Franco where
Yeah.
he's like, "What the fuck, Evan?" And he's just like, "It's gym class."
It's
Oh
soccer,
no, no,
Greg.
yeah,
It's
it's
soccer.
soccer.
It's soccer, Greg. It's soccer. And even being a soccer player, I was like, it's gym class soccer. Um,
Yeah,
but I just love, you know, Seth kicks the ball away. You're getting that? No, I'm not. And he's just running away. Just,
also, we have to bring up Seth's obsession with drawing dicks as a
yes.
kid. That is so great.
It's such a stupid but wonderful character
Yeah,
moment where you just go, no hot
like
dogs, no popsicles. You know what foods are shaped like the dicks? The best kinds.
yeah, like if you pulled everyone in the world before watching that movie, guess something that happens in this movie. No one in the world would guess that.
Nobody. And it's just so funny. And another huge positive for me in this film, it ignites my love for Van Halen. I already liked Van Halen, but when you're getting Panama at the end of the cop car sequence at the
Yeah,
end, it's impossible not to fall in love with it. It's tremendous. I fucking love that scene where it's just Panama and he just crashes
yeah.
right in. Oh,
I would
tremendous.
say I would go so far as to say like, as a comedy, it's near perfect.
For a comedy, I truly believe it is perfect. It has
Yeah,
so many beats. There is some good character moments. There's a heart to it that you want to root for the boys. As dumb as they are, you want to root for the boys. Where even like if you look at Seth, he doesn't have that many redeeming qualities throughout the majority of this movie.
no, he's an awful person.
And yet you're rooting for him because it's it's Jonah Hill at his earlier days where it's just Jonah Hill being extremely charming. Uh,
Yeah,
it's so much more fun, and I adore Superbad, and uh, it's just so
there's not
good. It's so
there's
good.
there's literally not a scene where you don't laugh.
Yeah,
Like all the jokes hit. That is rare.
Yes, and that's another reason why I think it's just perfect. It's just not almost. There's nothing in that movie that falls flat for me. Every joke that's supposed to be a joke is great, and even the stuff that's like subtle, you're
Well,
still like, yeah, it's great, love
e-
it.
even the stuff that really isn't that funny, you still laugh really hard. Like McLovin wearing the Aladdin vest. Like that is not that funny of an idea, but the way they show it is just hilarious.
Right. And I also think it's great. They have a lot of physical comedy in this, but they have a lot of good jokes and dialogue comedy in this. I think this is a great amalgamation of what a modern comedy should be. Take the things of the past, use that physical comedy, use that show more than tell, but then use
Yeah,
the really fun banter and dialogue of a modern day audience need and put that all together. It's just fun. It's just so much fun. And that's what makes me think about that is I just think of like game days on a Friday night going into a Saturday with
yeah,
Superbad. Just like the stupidity in which you're dying to have fun. So anything that even remotely breaks the boredom of your week equals fun. That's what Superbad invokes for me. It makes me think of after a football game or after a basketball game, people just being like, we need to kill boredom. How do we kill boredom? Let's do some of the dumbest things we can do to do that. That's what
yeah.
Superbad says to me.
I always remember it as like a perennial sleepover movie
Yeah.
for my group of friends.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's a such a good movie. Such a good movie. I adore that movie so much. But that is our top five lists. No repeats.
yeah.
I
I told
definitely
you,
when you said there
no
was going to be
overlap.
no repeats, I was like, there's got to be at least one. Um,
Couple of honorable mentions the same, but
yeah, honorable mentions the same, or some of my honorable mentions were in your list, but a lot of good fun, and I think we covered a lot of different ways to view school. That was always the big task with this was could you echo all the ways of going back to school, not just they're in a school, ergo it's a school movie.
yeah.
Yeah, and there's more movies that I think about it now that like Van Wilder was a movie I would think about putting on this list,
Hmm.
um, which I thought would be super fun to have. Just a lot of those classic style movies in there. But Revenge of the Nerds is another one I'd always kind of consider for that as well. Just so much fun to have around. So, but that is the end of our list. Super fun to do, and it's great. Hope you guys
Yeah.
enjoyed this show. If you did, give us a like, a comment, a subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, leave us a review. That'd be absolutely tremendous if you could do that for us. But keep checking out the rest of our content Monday through Saturday over at PTE Creative. Great place. And go check out our socials, TikTok and Instagram. Get a little bit of stuff extra. And if you want to support us even more, head over to Etsy Shop. It's ptecreative.etsy.com. Get yourself some cool merch. It's all about the things that we talk about on the channel. Good times are had by all. Are we going back to big box office on our next episode?
Yeah, I think Dark Knight,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, so we did pause The Dark Knight. That originally was going to follow right after Batman versus Superman, but this hit home a little bit more in terms of recording time. So we're going to go to The Dark Knight as our next episode over on the big box office series here on the ONETA Movie Show, which I know you guys are going to look forward to because The Dark Knight is legitimately one of the best movies of all time. But who would have said it? That is going to do it here for the show. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening. We appreciate you. Go watch a great movie and enjoy your day. Peace, love, and hugs to you all. Bye!